Jake Matthews straightened his blue uniform jacket and checked his watch. Another busy day aboard the Stellar Dawn, the biggest passenger ship traveling between Earth and Mars. He had been working as a flight attendant for 15 years, and he knew every rule in the book. Today would be no different. The ship was massive, with 3 levels of passenger seating. First-class passengers paid top dollar for luxury seats and perfect service. Economy-class passengers got basic seats and basic treatment. Jake made sure everyone knew the difference. He walked through the economy section, checking that passengers had their safety belts on. The ship would leave Earth Station Alpha in 20 minutes. Most passengers looked nervous. This was probably their first trip to Mars. Jake had made this journey hundreds of times. Near the back of economy class, Jake noticed a man in seat 47C. The passenger looked ordinary, maybe 40 years old with dark hair and a calm face. He wore simple clothes, old jeans and a plain black shirt. Nothing special about him at all. The man was reading a book about space navigation. Jake thought that was strange. Most passengers watched movies or slept during the long trip to Mars. This guy seemed genuinely interested in how spaceships worked. "Excuse me," the passenger said politely as Jake walked by. "Could I get an extra blanket? I tend to get cold during long flights." Jake stopped and looked at the man's ticket. Economy. Class seat 47C, passenger name Alex Rivera. "Just another budget traveler trying to get special treatment?" "Sorry, sir," Jake said in a bored voice. "Extra blankets are only for first-class passengers. You can purchase one from our shop for 25 credits. Alex Rivera smiled slightly. "I understand the rules, but I was hoping you might make an exception. I travel this route quite often, and I know the ship can get pretty cold once we reach deep space." Jake felt annoyed. This passenger thought he was special, just like all the others who tried to bend the rules. "Sir, I've been doing this job for 15 years. I know exactly how cold it gets and I know the rules. If you wanted extra comfort, you should have bought a first-class ticket." Rivera nodded calmly. "Of course, thank you anyway." Jake walked away, feeling satisfied that he had put another pushy passenger in his place. Behind him, he heard other passengers whispering to each other. Some of them were looking at Rivera with wide eyes, but Jake ignored them. Passengers always gossiped about something. Danny Cole, a young flight attendant on his first month of work, approached Jake near the Yao galley. "Hey Jake, did you see that guy in 47C? Some of the passengers seem to recognize him from somewhere." Jake shrugged. "Probably thinks he's some kind of celebrity. You get all types in economy class, Danny. Don't let them fool you into giving special treatment. Follow the rules and you'll do fine." Danny looked uncertain. "But some lady in first class asked me if that was really Commander Rivera. She seemed pretty excited about it." "Commander Rivera?" Jake laughed. "Kid, that guy couldn't command a paper airplane. Look at him. Cheap clothes, economy seat, reading a book like some kind of student. Real commanders fly first class, trust me." The ship's announcement system crackled to life. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Lisa Harper speaking. Welcome aboard the Stellar Dawn. We will be departing Earth Station Alpha in 15 minutes for our journey to Mars Colony Beta. Flight time will be approximately 48 hours. Jake began his safety demonstration for the economy section. He showed passengers how to use their oxygen masks, where the emergency exits were, and what to do if the ship lost power. Most passengers paid attention, but Alex Rivera just sat quietly, looking out the window at the stars. "In case of emergency," Jake announced, "please remain calm and follow crew instructions. The Stellar Dawn is equipped with the latest safety systems and has an excellent safety record." Rivera turned his head slightly at that comment, and Jake caught a small smile on the man's face. What was so funny about safety procedures? After the demonstration, Jake walked back through the cabin. He noticed Rivera was now talking quietly, with an elderly woman in the next seat. She looked amazed by whatever he was telling her. 15 different planets? Jake heard her say. "That's incredible." Rivera nodded. "Space is bigger than most people realize, Mrs. Patterson. There's always something new to discover out there." Jake rolled his eyes. Another passenger making up stories to impress people. He had heard it all before. Fake war heroes, pretend explorers, wannabe pilots. They all wanted attention. The ship's engines hummed to life, and Jake felt the familiar vibration that meant they were preparing to leave the station. He secured the galley equipment and made sure all passengers were properly seated. As they pulled away from Earth Station Alpha, Jake looked out one of the small windows. The blue and green planet Earth grew smaller behind them. Mars was still 2 days away, a tiny red dot in the distance. He walked past Rivera's seat one more time. The man was now looking at a small device that showed the ship's position and speed. It looked like some kind of advanced navigation computer, much more sophisticated than the cheap tablets most passengers carried. Interesting route, Rivera said to himself too quietly for most people to hear, but Jake caught the words. "Is there a problem with our flight path, sir?" Jake asked, unable to hide the sarcasm in his voice. Rivera looked up with those calm eyes. "Not at all. Captain Harper is an excellent pilot. She's taking us on the most efficient route possible given current solar wind conditions." Jake stared at him. How would an economy passenger know about solar winds or flight efficiency? "And how exactly would you know that?" "I've spent a lot of time in space," Rivera replied simply. "You learn to read the signs." Before Jake could respond, the ship lurched slightly as they cleared the station's gravity field. A few passengers gasped, but Rivera didn't even blink. He just kept looking at his navigation device like nothing had happened. Jake walked away, shaking his head. Some people watched too many space movies and thought they were experts. Real space travel wasn't like the films. It was routine, boring, and safe. The Stellar Dawn had been making this run for 5 years without any problems. As the ship settled into its cruise speed toward Mars, Jake began preparing for the long journey ahead. He had no idea that in less than 12 hours, everything he thought he knew about space travel, and about the quiet man in seat 47C, would change forever. 12 hours into the journey, Jake Matthews was tired. The Stellar Dawn had settled into its long cruise toward Mars, and most passengers were sleeping or watching movies on their personal screens. The ship's lights had dimmed to simulate nighttime, helping people adjust to the ship's schedule. Jake walked through the quiet corridors, checking on passengers and making sure everything was normal. The ship felt peaceful, with only the gentle hum of the engines and the soft whoosh of the air recycling system. In the economy section, he noticed that Alex Rivera was not in his seat. Jake looked around and spotted him near one of the observation windows, standing alone and looking out at the stars. The man seemed completely relaxed, like he belonged there. "Sir, passengers should remain in their seats during cruise phase," Jake said, approaching Rivera. Rivera turned and smiled. "The rules actually allow passengers to move around during cruise, as long as we're not near any gravitational fields or course changes. We won't hit Mars orbit for another 36 hours. Jake felt annoyed again. This passenger seemed to know the rules better than he should. "How do you know so much about space travel regulations?" "I read a lot," Rivera said simply, turning back to look out the window. "Beautiful view, isn't it? You can see 3 different star systems from here." Jake looked out the window. To him, it just looked like empty space with tiny dots of light. "If you say so. Just don't wander around too much. Other passengers might complain." Rivera nodded. "Of course, I'll be careful." As Jake walked away, he heard Rivera talking quietly into a small communication device. The words were too soft to understand, but Jake caught something about position reports and all clear, probably just checking in with family back on Earth. An hour later, Jake was in the crew galley preparing snacks for the next meal service. Danny Cole rushed in looking excited and worried at the same time. "Jake, something weird is happening," Danny whispered. "I was on the upper deck, and I saw Captain Harper and her senior officers having an emergency meeting. They looked really serious." Jake shrugged. "Probably just routine navigation stuff. Captains have meetings all the time." "But I heard them talking about unknown contacts on the sensors," Danny insisted, "and something about possible threats in this sector." That got Jake's attention. "Unknown contacts? What kind of contacts?" I don't know. They stopped talking when they saw me. But Chief Wilson from security was there too, and he never comes to navigation meetings unless something is really wrong. Jake thought about this. Pete Wilson was the ship's security chief, a tough former military man who usually spent his time dealing with drunk passengers and minor disputes. If he was in a meeting with the captain, it might be serious. Did you hear anything else? Jake asked. Danny shook his head. They went into the captain's private office and closed the door. But Jake, I've never seen Captain Harper look that worried before. Jake decided to investigate. He left Danny in the galley and walked toward the bridge area. The corridors near the command section were usually busy with crew members, but now they seemed almost empty. As he got closer to the captain's office, he could hear voices through the door. The words were muffled, but he caught fragments of the conversation. 3 contacts appeared on long-range sensors. Definitely not human ships. Jake pressed closer to the door, trying to hear more. Never seen anything like this before. They're huge, at least 10 times our size. His blood went cold. Non-human ships, that was impossible. Humans had been traveling in space for 50 years, and they had never encountered any other intelligent life. The scientists all said the chances were tiny, maintaining distance for now. But they're clearly watching us. Jake backed away from the door, his mind racing. If there really were alien ships out there, the passengers needed to know. People had a right to be warned about danger. He hurried back through the ship, looking for signs that something was wrong. In the main passenger areas, everything seemed normal. People were reading, sleeping, or talking quietly. No one seemed to know about any potential threat. As he passed through economy class, Jake noticed that Alex Rivera was back in his seat, but he wasn't relaxing like the other passengers. Instead, he was studying his navigation device very carefully, occasionally making notes on a small tablet. Jake stopped and watched Rivera for a moment. The man's behavior seemed different now, more focused, more alert, like he was monitoring something important. "Everything okay, sir?" Jake asked, approaching Rivera's seat. Rivera looked up with those calm eyes. "Fine, thank you. Just keeping track of our progress." "Most passengers don't worry about navigation details," Jake said, trying to sound casual. "Are you in some kind of hurry to get to Mars?" Rivera smiled slightly. "Not particularly. I just like to know where I am and what's happening around me." "Old habit." Jake studied the man's face. Rivera seemed completely unworried, despite whatever was happening with unknown contacts and emergency meetings. Either he didn't know about the situation, or he knew something that made him feel safe. "Have you noticed anything unusual during the flight?" Jake asked, fishing for information. "Like what?" Rivera asked. "I don't know. Anything that seemed different or strange." Rivera was quiet for a moment, looking at Jake with an expression that seemed almost amused. "Space is full of unusual things, Mr. Matthews. Most of them aren't dangerous if you know how to handle them properly." How did Rivera know his name? Jake was sure he had never introduced himself to this passenger. Before Jake could ask, the ship's communication system crackled to life. "Attention all crew members," came Captain Harper's voice. "Please report to your emergency stations immediately. This is not a drill. Repeat, all crew to emergency stations." The announcement was calm and professional, but Jake could hear the tension underneath. Around him, passengers began to stir and look worried. "What's an emergency station?" asked an elderly man in the seat across from Rivera. Jake's training kicked in. "It's just a precaution, sir. Please remain calm and stay in your seats. The crew will handle whatever needs to be done." But as he said the words, Jake felt his own fear growing. In 15 years of space travel, he had never heard an emergency stations call that wasn't a drill. Rivera stood up and placed a gentle hand on the elderly man's shoulder. "Don't worry, Mr. Patterson. The crew of the Stellar Dawn is very well trained. They can handle any situation that comes up." Again, Jake wondered how Rivera seemed to know so much about the ship and its crew, and why did he seem so confident when everyone else was starting to panic? As Jake hurried toward his emergency station, he had the strange feeling that Alex Rivera knew exactly what was happening. and that the quiet man in economy class might be much more important than he appeared. Jake rushed to his emergency station in the crew quarters, his heart beating fast. Other crew members were hurrying through the corridors, all looking worried and confused. Nobody seemed to know what was happening. Emergency stations, usually, meant mechanical problems or medical emergencies. Jake had done dozens of drills, but this felt different. The tension in Captain Harper's voice had been real. At his station, Jake found Danny Cole and 3 other flight attendants waiting for instructions. They were supposed to help passengers stay calm and follow safety procedures during emergencies. "What do you think is wrong?" whispered Maria Santos, a senior flight attendant with 10 years of experience. Danny heard something about unknown contacts, Jake said quietly. Maybe other ships in distress? In the middle of empty space? Maria looked doubtful. "We're nowhere near any shipping lanes. There shouldn't be anyone else out here." Before anyone could answer, the ship's communication system activated again. "Attention all passengers and crew," came Captain Harper's voice, but now she sounded much more serious. "We are experiencing an unusual situation. Please remain in your seats and stay calm. We will provide more information as soon as possible." Jake looked at the others. Captain Harper had not said mechanical problem or medical emergency. She had said unusual situation. That could mean anything. "I need to check on the passengers," Jake said. "They're probably getting scared." He left the crew area and walked back into the main cabin. The atmosphere had changed completely. Passengers were talking nervously to each other, and many were looking out the windows, trying to see what was wrong. Jake made his way to the observation deck, where about 20 passengers had gathered. They were all pressed against the large windows staring out into space. "There!" shouted a woman in a red dress. "I can see something moving." Jake pushed through the crowd to look out the window. At first, he saw only the usual view of stars and empty space. Then his eyes caught something that made his blood freeze. 3 enormous shapes were becoming visible against the starfield. They had been invisible before, but now they seemed to be revealing themselves. The ships were massive, easily 10 times the size of the stellar dawn. Their hulls were dark and covered with strange patterns that seemed to shift and move. "What are those?" asked a young man standing next to Jake. Jake couldn't answer. He had never seen anything like these ships before. They didn't look human at all. The design was completely alien, curved and organic, like they had been grown rather than built. More passengers crowded around the windows. The fear in the air was thick and real. Children began to cry and adults spoke in frightened whispers. "Are those military ships?" someone asked. "They don't look like any human ships I've ever seen," another person replied. Jake realized he needed to take control of the situation before panic spread through the entire ship. "Everyone please stay calm," he announced in his loudest voice. "I'm sure Captain Harper will explain everything soon." But even as he said the words, Jake felt his own terror growing. Those ships were clearly not human, which meant humanity was not alone in space. And if these aliens had surrounded the stellar dawn, they probably were not friendly visitors. Suddenly, all the lights on the ship flickered. The alien vessels were getting closer, and Jake could see details on their hulls. Weapons that looked like nothing humans had ever built, and symbols that hurt to look at directly. The ship's communication system crackled with static, then cleared to reveal a voice. That was definitely not human. It spoke in heavily accented English with sounds that no human throat could make. "Human vessel," the voice said, filled with contempt and amusement. "You will stop your engines and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will result in immediate destruction." Screams erupted throughout the observation deck. Several passengers fainted and others began pushing toward the exits. Jake tried to maintain order, but fear was spreading like wildfire. "Please remain calm," he shouted over the noise. "The crew will handle this situation." But Jake's own voice was shaking. How could any human crew handle alien warships that were 10 times their size? The alien voice continued speaking. "I am War Prime Kethvar of the Zelthani Confederation. Your species is now property of the Confederation. You will be processed for slave labor or biological experimentation, depending on your usefulness. Jake felt sick. Slave labor? Biological experimentation? These aliens weren't just hostile, they were talking about treating humans like animals. Through the chaos on the observation deck, Jake noticed one person who seemed completely calm. Alex Rivera stood near the back window, studying the alien ships with the same focused attention he had given his navigation device earlier. While everyone else was panicking, Rivera looked almost interested, like he was analyzing the aliens' ships and weapons, making mental notes about their capabilities. "Sir," Jake called out, pushing through the crowd toward Rivera. "We need to get everyone to the emergency shelters." Rivera turned to look at him, and Jake was shocked by what he saw in the man's eyes. There was no fear at all. Instead, Rivera looked like a professional studying a problem that could be solved. "The emergency shelters won't help against weapons of that size," Rivera said calmly. "But don't worry, Mr. Matthews. These aliens are about to learn something important about humanity." "What do you mean?" Jake asked, confused by Rivera's confidence. Before Rivera could answer, Captain Harper's voice came over the communication system again. "All passengers, please proceed to the emergency shelters immediately. Crew members, implement lockdown procedures. This is not a drill." The alien voice interrupted her. "Human captain, you have 5 minutes to surrender your vessel. After that, we will begin target practice on your passenger compartments." More screams filled the observation deck. Parents grabbed their children and ran toward the exits. The panic was becoming uncontrollable. But Rivera remained perfectly still, watching the alien ships through the window. Jake could see him counting something, possibly the number of weapons visible on the alien hulls. "How are you so calm?" Jake demanded. "Don't you understand what's happening? We're all going to die." Rivera finally looked away from the window and met Jake's eyes. For the first time since Jake had met him, Rivera's expression was completely serious. "Mr. Matthews," Rivera said quietly, "I think it's time you learned something about the ship. You work on and about the passengers you've been serving." Before Jake could ask what he meant, alarms began blaring throughout the stellar dawn. Red emergency lights bathed the corridors in an eerie glow. The alien war prime's voice echoed through the ship one more time. 4 minutes, humans. Then we demonstrate why the Zelthani Confederation rules this galaxy." Jake looked around at the terrified passengers, then back at Rivera's strangely confident face. Something was about to happen, but he had no idea what. All he knew was that the quiet man from economy class seemed to know something that nobody else did. And Jake was about to discover that everything he thought he knew about space travel, about the stellar dawn, and about humanity's place in the galaxy was completely wrong. Jake stared at Alex Rivera, his mind racing with questions. Around them, passengers were running toward the emergency shelters, screaming and crying. But Rivera stood perfectly still, as calm as if he were waiting for a bus. "What do you mean? About the ship and passengers?" Jake demanded. "We're about to be destroyed by aliens and you're talking in riddles." Rivera checked his watch. 3 minutes left according to their deadline. "Come with me, Mr. Matthews. There are some things you need to see." "I can't leave my post," Jake protested. "I have to help the passengers." "The passengers will be fine," Rivera said with strange confidence. "But you won't understand what's about to happen unless you see the truth." Against his better judgment, Jake followed Rivera through the panicking crowds. Instead of heading toward the emergency shelters like everyone else, Rivera walked in the opposite direction, toward a section of the ship that Jake rarely visited. They reached a corridor that Jake had walked through hundreds of times. But Rivera stopped at what looked like a normal wall panel and pressed his hand against it. To Jake's amazement, the panel glowed blue and slid aside, revealing a hidden elevator. "How did you know that was there?" Jake asked, shocked. "Because I helped design this ship," Rivera said simply, stepping into the elevator. Jake hesitated. Everything about this situation felt wrong. Secret elevators, hidden passages, and a passenger who seemed to know more about the stellar dawn than its own crew. "Are you some kind of spy?" Jake asked, as they rode the elevator down to a level that wasn't supposed to exist. Rivera smiled sadly. Not a spy, Mr. Matthews. Just someone who has been trying to keep people like you safe even when you don't know you need protecting. The elevator stopped, and the doors opened to reveal something that made Jake's jaw drop. They were standing in a massive military command center, filled with advanced computers, tactical displays, and uniformed personnel working at control stations. "This is impossible," Jake whispered. "This level doesn't exist on the ship blueprints." "The blueprints you've seen are fake," Rivera explained, walking into the command center. "The real Stellar Dawn is much more than a passenger liner." Jake followed him, staring at everything in amazement. The command center was bigger than the entire passenger deck above. Dozens of people in military uniforms were working at stations, monitoring displays that showed the alien ships outside. "Commander Rivera," called out a woman with captain's stripes on her uniform. "We've been waiting for your orders, sir." Jake's head spun. Commander Rivera. The woman had called him Commander, not Passenger or Mister. Rivera nodded to the woman. "Status report, Colonel Barnes. 3 Zelthani heavy cruisers, sir. They appeared on our sensors 20 minutes ago and have been maintaining position at 2,000 kilometers. No additional contacts detected. Weapons status? All systems charged and ready, sir. The crew is standing by for your command." Jake couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Rivera, who are you really?" Rivera turned to face him, and for the first time, Jake saw the man's true nature. Gone was the relaxed, casual passenger from economy class. In his place stood someone with the bearing and confidence of a military leader. Admiral Alexander Rivera, commanding officer of the Stellar Defense Initiative, Rivera said formally. "And this ship is the prototype for humanity's new defensive fleet." "Admiral," Jake felt dizzy. "But you were sitting in economy class. You asked for a blanket." "I always travel in economy when I'm moving between sectors," Rivera explained. "It helps me stay connected with the people I'm sworn to protect. And it lets me observe how our crews perform under normal conditions." Jake thought back to all the times he had been rude to Rivera, dismissing him as just another budget passenger. I had no idea." "You weren't supposed to," Rivera said kindly. "The whole point of the Stellar Dawn project is to appear harmless, while carrying enough firepower to defend against exactly this kind of threat." Colonel Barnes approached them. "Sir, the Zelthani are demanding surrender in 2 minutes. Should we reveal our capabilities?" Rivera walked to the main tactical display, which showed the 3 alien ships surrounding the Stellar Dawn. Jake could see that the display was far more advanced than anything on the regular bridge upstairs. "How long have you known about aliens?" Jake asked, still trying to process everything. 20 years, Rivera answered. "We've been tracking their expansion across this part of the galaxy. The Zelthani Confederation has destroyed or enslaved dozens of species. Earth Command decided long ago that when they finally found us, we needed to be ready." 20 years? Jake was stunned. Why didn't anyone tell the public? "Because panic wouldn't help anyone," Rivera explained. "Instead, we built ships like this one. Vessels that look like civilian transports but are actually the most advanced warships humanity has ever created." Jake looked around the command center again. "All those passengers upstairs, about half are real civilians," Colonel Barnes said. "The other half are military personnel traveling in disguise. We use passenger ships as cover for moving our forces around the solar system." Rivera studied the tactical display carefully. "The Zelthani think they've found an easy target. A helpless passenger ship full of primitive humans. They're about to learn how wrong they are." 1 minute to their deadline, sir," reported a technician. Jake felt overwhelmed by everything he was learning. "So, Captain Harper?" "Captain Harper commands the civilian sections of the ship," Rivera explained. "She's a good officer, but she doesn't know about this level or our real mission. Only essential personnel are cleared for the full truth." "And you're really going to fight those massive alien ships?" Jake asked, looking at the display. The Zelthani vessels were still enormous compared to the Stellar Dawn. Rivera's expression grew cold and determined. "Mr. Matthews, those aliens have spent centuries bullying smaller, weaker species. They think humans will be just another easy conquest. They're about to discover that Earth doesn't produce easy conquests." 30 seconds, sir," the technician announced. Rivera walked to the central command chair and sat down. Around him, the military crew prepared for battle with practiced efficiency. Jake realized he was about to witness humanity's first real space battle against an alien enemy. "Sir?" Colonel Barnes asked. "What about the civilian passengers?" "They're still panicking in the emergency shelters." Rivera considered this. "Let them stay there for now. When this is over, they'll have quite a story to tell. But first, let's show the Zelthani what happens when they threaten human civilians." "Time's up, sir," the technician reported. "The aliens are charging their weapons." Rivera's voice became hard as steel. "Then it's time they met the real stellar dawn. All stations battle ready. Let's give these aliens a lesson in human hospitality." Jake gripped the nearest railing, knowing that everything was about to change. The quiet man from economy class was actually one of humanity's greatest military leaders, and the passenger ship was really a disguised warship. In a few seconds, the galaxy would learn that humans were not the helpless prey species they appeared to be. Admiral Rivera sat in the command chair, his fingers moving across the control panel with practiced ease. Jake watched in amazement as the entire ship began to transform around them. "Initiate combat configuration," Rivera ordered calmly. Immediately, alarms started sounding throughout the hidden military levels. The walls around the command center began to shift and move. Panels slid aside to reveal weapon control stations that had been completely hidden moments before. "Sir, all weapon systems coming online," reported Colonel Barnes. "Plasma cannons charging to full power." Jake stared at the tactical display in disbelief. Icons were appearing all over the screen, showing weapons that he never knew existed on the ship. The Stellar Dawn wasn't just carrying a few defensive guns, it was loaded with enough firepower to destroy a small moon. "How is this possible?" Jake whispered. "I've worked on this ship for months. How could all of this be hidden?" "Advanced holographic projectors," explained a technician nearby. "The passenger areas you know are real, but they're surrounded by military sections that are completely invisible to civilian sensors." On the main screen, Jake could see the outside of the ship changing. The smooth, peaceful hull of a passenger liner was folding away to reveal angular armor plating and massive weapon turrets. What had looked like decorative panels were actually gun ports that were now opening to expose gleaming cannon barrels. "The Zelthani are hailing us, sir," reported the communications officer. "They seem confused." Rivera smiled grimly. "Put them on screen." The main display switched to show the bridge of the alien flagship. War Prime Kethvar appeared, a tall reptilian creature with glowing red eyes and armor covered in sharp spikes. When he saw Rivera, his expression changed from arrogant confidence to shocked surprise. "What is this trickery?" Kethvar demanded, in his harsh, alien voice. "Your ship was a simple transport vessel." "War Prime Kethvar," Rivera said politely. "I am Admiral Alexander Rivera of the Earth Defense Force. Your 5 minutes are up, and we decline your offer of slavery." Kethvar's eyes widened. "Earth Defense Force, impossible. Our scouts reported that your species has no military capability." "Your scouts saw exactly what we wanted them to see," Rivera replied. "We've been watching the Zelthani Confederation for 20 years, learning about your tactics and your weaknesses." Jake watched the alien leader's face change from surprise to anger. "You dare to spy on the Confederation? We have conquered 50 star systems. Your primitive weapons cannot harm our ships." "Perhaps you should scan us again," Rivera suggested calmly. On the tactical display, Jake could see the alien ships running new sensor sweeps. The results must have been shocking because all 3 Zelthani vessels suddenly began backing away from the Stellar Dawn. "Impossible," Kethvar roared. "No ship that size could carry weapons of that magnitude." Rivera stood up from his command chair. "War Prime, you made a critical error. You assumed that because humanity appeared weak, we actually were weak. You never considered that we might be intelligent enough to hide our true capabilities until we needed them." Jake looked at the weapons display again. The numbers were incredible. The Stellar Dawn was carrying enough plasma cannons to punch through the armor of ships 10 times its size. And according to the tactical readout, there were other weapons systems that were even more powerful. "Sir," Colonel Barnes reported, Long-range sensors are detecting additional contacts. The rest of our fleet is arriving on schedule. Additional contacts? Jake asked. Rivera nodded to the display. Mr. Matthews, meet the real Earth Defense Force. The tactical screen exploded with new icons. Ships were appearing all around the alien vessels. Dozens of them, all identical to the transformed Stellar Dawn. Jake realized that what he had thought was a single passenger liner was actually part of a massive hidden fleet. How many ships? Jake asked in amazement. 47 vessels in this battle group alone, Rivera answered. And this is just one of 12 such groups currently patrolling human space. War Prime Kethvar was staring at his own tactical displays, in horror. This is impossible. Where did all these ships come from? They've been here the whole time, Rivera explained. Hidden among our civilian traffic, disguised as cargo haulers, passenger liners, and mining ships. Every major shipping route in human space is protected by vessels like this one. Jake felt a surge of pride mixed with shock. Humanity had not been sitting helplessly in space, waiting to be discovered by hostile aliens. Instead, they had been quietly building the most powerful defensive fleet in the galaxy. Sir, the weapons officer called out, all ships report ready for combat. We have complete tactical superiority. Rivera studied the alien formation. The 3 Zelthani ships were now surrounded by nearly 50 human vessels, all with their weapons, trained on the invaders. War Prime Kethvar, Rivera said, you have 2 choices. You can retreat back to Confederation space and report that humanity is under the protection of the Earth Defense Force. Or you can fight and discover why your 50 conquered systems couldn't prepare you for this. The alien leader's face was filled with rage and disbelief. The Confederation will not retreat from primitive animals. Then you'll learn why we stopped being primitive a long time ago, Rivera replied. Fire. The space around the Stellar Dawn erupted in brilliant flashes of light. Jake watched in awe as dozens of human ships opened fire simultaneously. The plasma beams were so bright they lit up the entire area like artificial stars. The first alien ship's shields lasted less than 3 seconds. The concentrated human firepower tore through their defenses like paper and began carving deep holes in their hull. The second ship tried to turn and run, but human weapons moved faster than alien engines. Sir, Colonel Barnes reported, the lead Zelthani vessel is requesting surrender. Too late for that, Rivera said coldly. They came here to enslave civilians. Now they face the consequences. Jake watched the battle unfold with a mixture of excitement and terror. The alien ships, which had seemed so massive and threatening just minutes before, were being systematically destroyed by human weapons that were far more advanced than anything the Zelthani had ever encountered. How did we get so powerful? Jake asked. 20 years ago, we barely had ships that could reach Mars. Rivera glanced at him. When you know that hostile aliens are expanding toward your home system, you find ways to advance very quickly. Human engineering combined with captured alien technology from their previous victims. We've been building and preparing while they assumed we were too primitive to be a threat. The last alien ship exploded in a brilliant ball of fire. In less than 10 minutes, the entire Zelthani attack force had been completely destroyed. Sir, the communications officer announced, we're receiving surrender requests from Zelthani forces throughout this sector. Word of our capabilities is spreading fast. Rivera nodded with satisfaction. Good. The galaxy needed to learn that humanity is not defenseless prey. Mr. Matthews, in a few hours, every alien species within 100 light-years will know that Earth is protected by the most advanced military force they've ever encountered. Jake looked around the command center, still trying to process everything he had witnessed. The quiet passenger from economy class was actually one of humanity's greatest military leaders, and the simple passenger liner was really a battleship that could destroy entire fleets. What happens now? Jake asked. Rivera smiled. Now the real work begins. The Zelthani Confederation will think twice before threatening any more human colonies, and the rest of the galaxy will finally understand that humanity has grown up. The command center was quiet now except for the soft hum of computers and the occasional report from crew members. Jake stood near Admiral Rivera, watching the tactical display show the remains of the 3 Zelthani ships floating in space like broken toys. "Sir," Colonel Barnes announced, "we're receiving communications from Zelthani forces across the sector. They're requesting immediate ceasefire and withdrawal agreements." Rivera nodded. "Patch me through to their sector commander." The main screen flickered and showed a different alien face. This one looked older and more cautious than War Prime Kethvar had been. The new alien's eyes were wide with fear and respect. "I am Fleet Commander Zektar of the Zelthani 4th Sector Fleet," the alien said carefully. We were not informed that humanity possessed such advanced military capabilities." "That was intentional," Rivera replied calmly. "Your Confederation has been expanding toward Earth space for 20 years. We wanted to see exactly how you treated the species you encountered." Jake listened as Rivera continued speaking to the alien commander. The Admiral's voice was firm, but not cruel, like a teacher explaining a lesson to a student who had misbehaved. "Your people enslaved the Keth Mori civilization and strip-mined their homeworld," Rivera said. "You turned the Veltar species into forced laborers in your factories. You destroyed the art and culture of 6 different civilizations because you considered them inferior." Fleet Commander Zektar looked uncomfortable. "Those species were technologically primitive. It is the way of the galaxy that the strong rule the weak." "Perhaps," Rivera agreed. "But you made a mistake when you assumed that technological appearance equals actual capability. Humans learned long ago that the best weapon is one your enemy never sees coming." Jake thought about everything he had witnessed in the past few hours. The secret military levels, the hidden weapons, the disguised fleet ships. Humanity had been playing a much deeper game than anyone realized. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving priority messages from Earth Command. They want a full battle report." "Tell them the test was successful," Rivera replied. "The Zelthani took the bait exactly as predicted. Every other hostile species in this sector will receive the message loud and clear." Jake realized what Rivera meant. This entire encounter had been planned. Humanity had deliberately made the Stellar Dawn look like an easy target, knowing that aggressive aliens like the Zelthani couldn't resist attacking what appeared to be a helpless passenger ship. "You used us as bait," Jake said, feeling a mix of admiration and concern. Rivera turned to face him. "We used ourselves as bait, Mr. Matthews. I was on that ship too, along with 47 other Earth Defense Force officers, traveling in civilian disguise. We all knew the risks. But the real passengers, they didn't know." "No, they didn't," Rivera admitted. "And that was necessary. If the civilians had known they were on a military vessel, they wouldn't have acted naturally. The Zelthani would have detected the deception." Colonel Barnes approached them with a data tablet. "Sir, the preliminary battle analysis is complete. Our weapons performed even better than projected. The new plasma cannons cut through Zelthani armor like it was made of paper." Rivera studied the tablet. "Excellent. What about their weapons?" "Completely ineffective against our shields, sir. Their technology appears to be at least 50 years behind ours." Jake was amazed. "How did we advance so far ahead of them? They've been conquering other species for centuries." "That was their weakness," Rivera explained. "The Zelthani always fought weaker opponents, so they never had to innovate. They became lazy and overconfident. Meanwhile, humanity spent 20 years studying every piece of their technology we could find, then building something better." "Sir," another technician reported, "long-range sensors show Zelthani fleets withdrawing from 4 different systems. The word is spreading fast." Rivera smiled with satisfaction. "Good. The galaxy needed to see this demonstration. Too many species have suffered under Zelthani rule because they thought resistance was hopeless." Jake looked at the tactical display, which now showed dozens of human ships patrolling the area where the battle had taken place. "What happens to all those other species the Zelthani conquered?" "That's the next phase of our plan," Rivera said. "Now that everyone knows humanity has the military power to back up our words, we can begin offering protection to species that want to free themselves from Confederation rule." "We're going to fight the entire Zelthani Confederation?" Jake asked. Concerned about the scope of such a conflict, "We're going to give them a choice," Rivera corrected. They can continue their expansion and face the full might of the Earth Defense Force, or they can retreat to their original territory and leave the other species alone. Colonel Barnes looked up from her workstation. Sir, we're receiving a priority. Communication from Zelthani High Command. They want to arrange immediate peace negotiations. Rivera considered this. How long since the battle ended? 18 minutes, sir. 18 minutes and they already want peace talks, Rivera mused. That tells us everything we need to know about how this demonstration affected them. Jake realized the true genius of humanity's strategy. By appearing weak while secretly becoming strong, humans had avoided years of costly warfare. Instead of fighting the Zelthani gradually as they expanded, Earth had waited until they could deliver one decisive blow that would end the conflict before it really began. Put them through, Rivera ordered. The screen showed a new alien face, this one wearing elaborate golden armor that marked him as a very high-ranking official. I am Supreme War Prime Thekvar, speaking for the Zelthani High Council, the alien said in a carefully respectful tone. We wish to discuss territorial boundaries and mutual non-aggression agreements with the Earth Defense Force. Rivera's expression was neutral. Supreme War Prime, humanity is willing to discuss peace. But our terms are simple: complete withdrawal from all systems containing non-Zelthani species, and reparations for the civilizations you've damaged. The alien's eyes widened. That would mean abandoning 43 star systems. Yes, it would. Rivera agreed calmly. Those systems never belonged to you in the first place. Consider it the price of learning that the galaxy contains species more advanced than yourselves. Jake watched the Supreme War Prime struggle with the reality of his situation. The Zelthani had built their entire civilization on being the strongest military force in their region. Now they faced a species that could destroy their fleets with ease. We will need time to consider these terms, the alien finally said. You have 72 hours, Rivera replied. After that, we begin liberating those star systems ourselves. The communication ended, leaving the command center in thoughtful silence. Do you think they'll agree? Jake asked. Rivera was quiet for a moment, studying the tactical displays that showed human ships throughout the sector. They'll agree, Mr. Matthews. The Zelthani are bullies, and bullies only understand strength. We just proved that humanity is stronger than they are. Jake looked around the command center one more time, still amazed by everything he had learned. What happens to me now? I can't go back to being a regular flight attendant after seeing all this. Rivera smiled. Actually, Mr. Matthews, we could use someone with your experience in the recruitment division. There are a lot of civilian crew members throughout the fleet who don't know the truth about their ships. Someone needs to help them understand their real role in defending humanity. Jake thought about the offer. After witnessing humanity's hidden strength and the dedication of people like Admiral Rivera, he couldn't imagine going back to his old life of serving snacks and enforcing petty rules. I accept, Jake said. But I have one question. That blanket, I refuse to give you in economy class. Rivera laughed. Don't worry about it, Mr. Matthews. I've been refused service by civilian crew members on 6 different ships. It's actually a good sign. It means our disguises are working perfectly. As the stellar dawn began its journey back toward Earth, Jake reflected on how much his world had changed in just one day. He had started the trip as a flight attendant who thought he understood everything about space travel. He was ending it as a member of humanity's greatest military achievement, a secret fleet that had just changed the balance of power in the galaxy forever.